Now, to get some more commentary on this and all the related matters, we bring in distinguished Senator Kevin Cramer of North Dakota. You know, Senator Cramer, I mean, Jamie is not saying anything you haven't said, or I haven't said, or others. But the fact that he said it, I find very interesting. He is a banker. He is a businessman. We live in the era of woke, as you and I know all too well, which is a pity. But his outspokenness and the way he characterized it and the war metaphor and that last sentence, I don't know, you know, folks, if I put it up on the full screen again, I'm going to have to read this one more time. This is so darn good. Put that last Jamie Dimon quote for me up on the full screen so everybody can see this thing. Go ahead. We can do it. 1, 2, 3. Here it is. All right. This is the chance to get our act together and to solidify. Just listen to this. It's so wonderful. The Western, free, democratic, capitalist, free people, free movements, freedom of speech, free religion for the next century. Period. End quote. Senator Cramer, what you think of that, sir?
Well, Larry, first of all, I got as much pleasure, maybe more, out of listening to your monologue than you did delivering it. But great job.
Thank you. Sir.
And with regard to Jamie Dimon, I think one of the reasons we love him so much is he's got the guts to say the things that I think a lot of his peers may think, but they're too concerned about, you know, being part of the cool kids club. And Jamie has never suffered from that. And so thank goodness that he's speaking out, because I think he does. Not only does he speak truth to power, but hopefully he empowers some of his colleagues to say the same things in their certain ways. So, but to cap it off that way, you know, wraps it in a bow, really, because everything else is pretty much specific to various industries or various issues. But at the end of the day, we're talking about the greatest experiment in the history of the world. That is America's exceptionalism, which is built on self-governance and an economic model that's built on capitalism, and we should stop apologizing for it and start championing it. And that's what he's doing.
You know, I really like your point about leadership. We need leadership from the boardroom. We need leadership from the C-suite. You're exactly right, Senator. There's not near enough of that around. And I'll be honest with you, look, everybody knows my political biases and so forth, but I know Jamie. I don't know how he votes. My guess is he votes very independently on common sense. But this is not a political statement. He's making a common sense business and banker statement, as America's security statement. That's the way I read this.
Totally. And I watched the interview, and I was honored to be on the same show shortly after it ran, and missing you, of course. But I agree. As I listened to it, I thought this is just common sense. But what it really is that this is America's exceptionalism in audible form, and nobody needs to apologize for it. And he just does a very good. And by the way, it's not the first time, as you noticed. Remember a couple of weeks ago, it was his testimony in response to a question by a Democrat on the House Financial Services Committee that made so many headlines, because again, he spoke truth to power in the bluntest form, and not offensively, but in a blunt form. And it's really important, because people need to hear that this is a long-term issue. This isn't just a one and done. This isn't a short-term issue. We're in a, I believe, Larry, in a recession. We see inflation continuing at a high level, if not rising a little bit, right, as we know in the last day or two, and we'll find out more tomorrow with the CPI when that comes out. And what's at the heart of all of this is that we are trying to get out of a recession and out of inflation by stifling demand, which is what the Federal Reserve does, when you and I know full well that the way to get out of a recession and inflation, the best way is to increase supply, to build and produce more of what we have and what we've been blessed with, and lead from ahead.
Wasn't it? That was the hearing where one of the lefties said something like, you know, when are you going to stop making loans to oil and gas companies or something like that, or when are we going to turn off the fossil spigots? And he said, I hope we never do, because if we do, we're going to, that's the road to hell, something like that. And then she called for people to boycott and take their money out of his bank, which was right. He just kind of reeled that off. You're right. I forgot about that one. I should have put it in. I enjoyed his war metaphor, because to some extent, if not only the Russian invasion of Ukraine and its totalitarian aspects, violating sovereignty and so forth, But also, he sees clearly that we should be the swing producer, not the Saudis or OPEC Plus. We were, and we should be again. And to some extent, that is a war metaphor.
It is, but it's a very appropriate metaphor, because remember, when we finally were able to lift the prohibition on exporting oil, that was a really big deal when we did that. And what that did is that changed the entire global market. At the time, previous to doing that, the Brent, which is, of course, the global index, and the WTI were separated by as much as sometimes $30. Well, when we became the exporter, grew our supply, met the global demands, we were able to bring the global price of oil down. And that benefited the whole world, not just the United States, but the whole world. We also, as you recall, that led to bringing down the price of gasoline. The reason we have an increase in price in gasoline prices now isn't a demand issue so much as it is a supply issue. We want to be able to supply a growing demand for a growing global economy. That's the solution. The solution isn't to shrink demand, which is what, of course, the other side wants to do. But that becomes a national security issue, Larry. Less dependence on adversaries and more dependence on friends. And it was really at the very early stages, prior to the war in Ukraine, prior to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Joe Biden weaponized natural gas by green-lighting the Nord Stream 2 pipeline.
Right.
I was in Ukraine in the middle of January. Every leader there, including President Zelensky, begged us to not do that, to not, and the president and I had an argument about it just before the shooting started. Well, here we are with our allies in Europe looking for help, and we have an administration that's not only not helping them and not even helping American energy and America's own recession and inflation challenges.
But we may do it again, because, as I understand it, the Bidens are trying to regulate so no more export of refined products. So wouldn't we be letting our allies down again and playing into Putin's hands again under that kind of regime?
Absolutely. We just strengthen his hand. We weaken our own. And furthermore, Larry, it's not good for climate. We produce these products at a much cleaner standard than do our adversaries. And so none of it makes sense at all, other than John Kerry gets to transfer his climate guilt to polluting countries. If that makes him feel better, swell. But that's a pretty big consequence and completely unnecessary. And this is why I think Jamie Dimon is speaking out so strongly, because he sees this as more than just JPMorgan Chase surviving. I mean, JPMorgan Chase is going to be fine, but is the American Republic going to be fine, and is the world going to be fine if America shrinks from its leadership position in energy production and development?
Just on that very last point, very, very quickly, it's a point Steve Forbes made yesterday here on set. The dirtiest oil comes from Russia, Venezuela, the Saudis. That's the dirty oil. We are the clean oil. So if you're an environmentalist, I would think you'd want more American oil and, of course, particularly natural gas. Give you the last word, Senator Cramer.
Well, and let's not forget, this is an administration that's negotiating with Iran. So they want to make Iran a bigger player.
Right.
So all of our enemies benefit from this behavior. So Jamie Dimon is not stretching at all when he makes a war footing illustration. It's absolutely right on point.
Senator Kevin Cramer, as always, thank you, sir. We appreciate you.